Makes you think, doesn't it? Time's clicking away, even here. Well, I've been in a series of messages about making each day count. And we've looked over several things. And today we're going to end this series. We're going to look at marks of a champion. And this is the concept of being a champion in life. And because there are some times that life can, drag us down. Next week, I'm going to begin a new series of messages. It's all leading up to Christmas, and our Thanksgiving Eve service is just called Christmas Lights. And we're going to be looking at a lot of different passages that have to do with light. And we will eventually get to the birth of Christ and some light that surrounded those events as well. Well, I'm sure that you have heard it said before, winners never quit. Quitters never win. All right? But I've kind of found out in life that even winners can sometimes feel like quitting. What do you do then? Maybe they need to hear the next, statement that says, hey, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, right? Well, I don't know. I think sometimes even the going can get tough enough that the tough just want to crawl back in bed. And what do you do then? Although his Major League Baseball career was very short-lived, I like the story of Brock Peterson. Now, he played for the Cardinals eventually, but you may not even know his name because it was so short-lived. Brock Peterson, he was the 49th round draft pick for the Minnesota Twins in 2002. And he climbed, up their system and got to AAA. But after 8 years, his dreams came to an end. And, he was let go by the Minnesota Twins and never did make his major league debut. At the urging of some of his baseball buddies, they said he ought to get in one of those, other kind of independent leagues, much like the Rascals, in O'Fallon. And so he did that. And in 2011 and 2012, he did very good in the independent league. But he decided that it was time to call it quits. And he was going to go to college. Because according to his contract with the Minnesota Twins, if he went to college at that time, they would pay for all of his expenses. But in 2012, literally hours before signing up for college classes, the St. Louis Cardinals called him and they signed him to a minor league contract. And in 2013, he put up some of his best numbers. He batted .306. He had 22 home runs in 390 plate appearances in AAA at Memphis. And then in June of 2013, after working hard for 11 years in the minor league system, Brock Peterson was called up and made his major league debut at the age of 29. Now, General Manager John Mozeliak, at the time, he made this statement. He said, very few times do players play 11 years in the minor leagues because usually they either quit or they are told to quit. For him to persevere, it's really a special story. I think becoming a winner carries with it this concept of I have to stay with it, okay? And I've got the strength to stay with it even when I feel like giving up. Now, you can call it endurance, you can call it determination, you can call it persistence or tenacity or whatever you want to call it. It is an undeniable mark of a champion. And those same things are an undeniable mark of someone who is going to follow Jesus in this life even when they feel like giving up, even when the brakes don't seem to be going your way. Now, this morning, I want to start off and I want to paint you a picture of endurance and determination because we're going to need these things in life and as we face life. I think a great picture of just sheer courage and determination is the Apostle Paul. And if you want to turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 4, I'm going to read from there in just a little bit, and I want you to get ready for that. In 2 Corinthians chapter 11, we find out that the Apostle Paul talked how he had been imprisoned. Now you think about these things, okay? He had been in prison. He had been flogged severely with a whip. He says that he was exposed to death. He says that he was beaten, that he was stoned, that he had gone without sleep and food, that he faced all kinds of dangers for the sake of preaching and teaching the message about Jesus. But he remained steadfast to his commitment to advance God's kingdom on earth. Now I want to read chapter 4, 2 Corinthians 4, and I'm going to read verse 1, and then I'm going to skip down to verse 5. Listen to what he writes here to the church at Corinth. He says, "Therefore, since through God's mercy we have this ministry, we do not lose heart." Let's skip over to verse 5. "For we do not preach ourselves, but Jesus Christ as Lord, and ourselves as your servants for Jesus' sake. For God, who said, 'Let light shine out of the darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Christ." Listen to this next part, okay? "But we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed. Perplexed, but not in despair. Persecuted, but not abandoned. Struck down, but not destroyed." And we're going to read some other parts out of that passage in a little while, so you might want to hold that ready. But here's this picture, and there are four things I want to bring out of this as a picture of determination and endurance. First of all, we find a picture of pressure. Pressure. In verse 8 it says, "We are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed." Now in the New Testament, it was written in the Greek language, and the Greek word there for hard-pressed, it conveys this idea of grain being hard-pressed together from all sides. And you think about that idea of being crushed. Paul, we could say, was a guy who was catching it from every side. But life was not squeezed out of him. He was not crushed. A second thing we find here is a picture of being at your wit's end. Maybe you can identify with that. It says in verse 8, perplexed, he says, "I've been perplexed, but not in despair." The Greek word there for perplexed, it means to be at a loss. It means to be uncertain. It means to have doubt. I think about a picture of a coach, okay, who's coaching a team that's just really struggling. And listen, they're not very good at passing. They have way too many turnovers. They have a low shooting percentage. They have 1 win and 10 losses. And the coach is at a loss for where am I even going to get help? But at the same time, the coach is not giving up. He is not in despair. And you see, we got to say that Paul felt like that at times. But he was not in total despair to the point of giving up. Third, we find a picture of being hunted down and chased. In verse 9, he also says persecuted, but not abandoned. It's the idea of being hunted down, and chased like an animal would be by a determined hunter. Yet he was able to elude being captured or shot down. I'm sure Paul felt like at times he was on the run from, angry and unethical men who had blood in their eyes. But he was never abandoned, he says. And I think about because Jesus was living in him and helping him. Fourth, we find here a picture of being knocked down. Okay, knocked down. It's a picture of a boxer, okay, who's in a boxing match, and he's been knocked down, and the referee is counting, but the boxer only rises back up again, and he goes back at it. I like what Knofel Staton says about this verse. He says, Paul was struck down many times, both emotionally, verbally, and socially, but he was never knocked out. Now, as we go through all of that, does it sound like that following Jesus is something that's easy? Can you see yourself in any of those pictures when you have to face certain situations in life? Do you ever feel like that you're under pressure? Let's laugh at that one, okay? Do you ever feel like that you're at your wit's end, or that you've been chased down, or that you've been knocked down? Well, sure we have. And you see the key word in the text there at each of those junctures is the word but. But. And so when confronted by difficult issues, you would expect people to feel crushed, to be in despair, abandoned, and destroyed. But that wasn't the case with Paul. There are two times in this section of Scripture. In verse 1, we read that one, and he said, we do not lose heart. And in verse 16, he says it again. We do not lose heart. And in the Greek language, okay, that word lose, it actually means to lose courage in the midst of problems. It has to do with giving up. It has to do with throwing in the towel. It has to do with saying, I quit, I'm done. But that wasn't Paul. He was determined to boldly preach the gospel of Christ, okay? He was determined to serve Jesus no matter how difficult the circumstances might get in his own life. And so how was it that Paul was able to come out a winner in spite of apparent defeat? Well, there's a few secrets of endurance that I want to talk about. Now that we can have a little bit of this picture of what it means to be under all these things, okay, just like the Apostle Paul. And here's the first secret that I think we have to remember in this lifetime. That is, we have to be willing to accept the fact that problems exist in an imperfect world. They really do. I want you to think about how Paul was a committed follower of Jesus Christ, but that commitment didn't mean God would shelter him from every problem in this world. Paul had to endure problems, right? And in reality, so will we. Now, some of you are dealing with some problems right now in your life that you really don't want. But in an imperfect world, it's happening. In my lifetime, I think about, things like how when I was 9 years old, I had two other brothers at the time, but my dad died when he was 29 of a brain aneurysm. And you kind of wonder, well, why did that all have to happen? I think about how I had a good friend in high school. He died of cancer at the age of 16. I think about how, in what I do in church, there have been moments where there's been some serious problems in church life, and there's been a little bit of division going on in ministry, and it kind of makes you have some sleepless nights and ties your stomach up in knots. At one point in life, I remember how Lisa and I, we got down to the last $50 that we had, and we didn't know where help was going to come from. I think life can be busy. I think life can sometimes feel like you're on this big carousel, and except the carousel is probably going about 30 miles an hour. And it feels like you can't get off. It just keeps going. About 6 years ago, my mom died of bone cancer at the age of 69. Too soon from my point of view. My stepfather, which is basically the only father I've ever known, he married my mom just a couple years after my dad died, and he has 9 stents in his heart right now. And, you wonder, like, well, how much time does he even have left? And raising kids alone will give you a heart attack, right? You see, all of our problems out here today, they're all different, aren't they? But, just like you, okay, we've all felt the pressure of life. We've all been at our wits' end. We've all felt like we've been chased. We all feel like we've been knocked down. Okay, now does that mean I'm supposed to give up on living life? Now, does that mean I'm supposed to give up on living for Jesus? No way. We need to have the attitude of what Paul had. He said, we do not lose heart. I'm not quitting. I'm not throwing in the towel. I am not giving up. And beyond that, folks, I think about how the problems of this world that we experience, that they really serve to shape us and mold us into the person God wants us to be. William Barclay, now there's a lot of passages I could go into, but I don't even have time for that. But William Barclay said, these trials are sent not to make us fall, but to help us soar. They are sent not to defeat us, but that we may defeat them. They are sent not to make us weaker, but to make us stronger. And so in many respects, our problems in this world becomes a testing ground to see what our faith is really made of. And what is your faith really made of? Are you consumed with worry? Or are you consumed with trusting in God? Are you restless, with fear? Or do you rest in His presence? I would never want to pretend, folks, that it's easy to endure problems in life. It is not. But please consider this. Instead of always asking, Lord, why is this happening to me? Maybe you want to ask, Lord, what can I learn from this problem to become the person you want me to be? Here's a second secret to endurance that I think we really need to pick up on in our life, and that is God's power is available when facing problems. It really is. I want to read 2 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 7. It says this, and we've already read it, but I'm reading it again. It says, we have this treasure, okay? That is a reference to the gospel in the text. This treasure of the gospel, it's good news, but we have this treasure, and he says, in jars of clay, which is a reference to all of us, to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not us. And then he goes on to talk about those things. Hey, we are hard-pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, and da-da-da-da-da. In my opinion, that's one of those verses in the Bible that literally ought to transform the way that we think about ourselves and that we think about God. We are described, folks, like clay pots. And I think about how a clay pot, okay, it's fragile. It is easily broken, but we have a stabilizing force in God. And He's one who's going to give us strength. He gives us poise. He gives us balance and support and hope and encouragement and a spirit to persevere even when we feel like we might be cracking up. I hope you don't crack up. Even when we feel like we're falling apart. God is a stabilizing force. In 2 Timothy chapter 4, Paul, he talks about there about the time that he had been arrested, of course, and he was on trial. That he had friends, they just deserted him. He went to his trial alone, and here's what he says: "But the Lord stood at my side and gave me strength." Listen, man, woman may fail you, but God will not. And that's what God can do for your life. Rick Ezell, he tells about his sister, and his sister's husband had died in a plane crash at the age of 45. And he says in many ways she was just completely dependent on her husband. And Mr. Ezell, he wrote this. He said, "I asked her later how she got through this horrifying ordeal. And she said, Rick, you know, if someone had told me this was going to happen before it happened, I would have told them I could not survive such pain and suffering. But through this experience, I have felt the quiet, calm, and comforting presence of God. He has given me the strength I have needed to face each day. Based on your need at the moment, you know what? We serve a God who can provide us with just the right amount of power that we need at that moment to get through whatever it is that we're facing. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12, the Apostle Paul, he talks too about how he apparently had some type of physical ailment, a disability, problem. And, you know, if I've never had that in my life, at least I don't think so. Now, I've got to where I can't see as good. You know, my knees kind of hurt when I sit down for a while and get back up. It takes me about 3 or 4 steps to get it back going again, you know. Those kind of things. But it says that he pleaded with the Lord to take that away 3 times, right? He said, I got this problem, God, you know about it. It's been going on for years. I just want you to take it away. And what did God say? But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you. And listen to this, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Well, that sounds weird, doesn't it? Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses. Wait, when was the last time we did that? So that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses. That sounds a little weird, doesn't it? He says, I delight in insults. I delight in hardships, in persecutions and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It's kind of a paradox of Scripture, you know. You see, when we actually acknowledge our weaknesses before God, and we say, okay, God, here's this weakness, God's grace, God's favor, God's goodness, God's generosity, and that's what grace is all about. It's going to be poured out in your life, and His strength, by His grace, will empower you to rise above your feelings, to rise above your circumstances with the kind of endurance that's going to keep on honoring God in your life, in your conduct, in your thoughts. And just like Paul, hey, our faith will not be weakened because of our problems. Rather, through our dependence on God, we will become spiritually stronger than we have ever been before. Now, this old clay pot right here, okay? Yeah, you can touch your clay pot if you want to. Okay? Hey, this old clay pot right here, it's dying. This clay pot, I don't have any disease that I know of right now, but this clay pot can get a disease. This clay pot is fragile. It can get distressed, but only through God's gracious power can strength actually come out of weakness. Only through God's grace can that grace actually be used as a tool in our life to accomplish His purposes on earth. Here's what French Arrington, he wrote this. He said, the divine answer to his prayer, he's talking about the Apostle Paul and what we read. The divine answer to his prayer was that power would come not by overcoming his weakness, but by bearing it. He says, apparently some weaknesses are not to be overcome. Through them, God's power is perfected. He says, in serving Christ, there are no guarantees of freedom from trouble. The Savior never promised us that. Paul, one of God's greatest servants, did not find it that way. It was when he was weak in his ministry, lacking physical and spiritual strength, that the power of God would work through him. The fact is that grace has always been and will always be enough, sufficient for the task or problems that confront us. So praise God for His grace, right? Here's the third secret I want to point out to endurance, and that is live to serve others. You see, when you encounter problems in this life, I mean, it can be very easy to kind of get wrapped up in all of my problems, to get focused on my life. And I can feel sorry for myself. But the kind of person that has the strength to carry on is going to maintain, okay, an attitude to serve others. As someone who had felt pressure in life, okay, he had been at his wit's end, he had been knocked down, he had felt like that he had been abandoned and all of those things. But listen to what he wrote to these Christians at Corinth in chapter 4, verse 15. We didn't read this one, but here's what it says. Okay, he says, all this. In other words, all this being at my wit's end and, you know, all this being perplexed and all these things, the picture, you know, we gave, all this is for your benefit, so that the grace that is reaching more and more people may cause thanksgiving to overflow to the glory of God. Okay, here was a man who had been through constant battles in his life, and he was enduring them because he was living to serve other people. And so it is with us, okay? We can find ourselves where we are enduring, and we're going to do that by having a greater cause than ourselves. And that is by serving other people. And there is no greater cause in this world, folks, than to actually serve others so that they might come to know the salvation and the grace of God that can actually save them. And knowing that what you're doing can actually save other people, that as you serve them, man, that gives you the ability to endure. Let's go to the last secret. And I think it's another important one, and that is live with an eternal perspective. It's so easy to just live in the here and now. We got to live with an eternal perspective. As you live life, it is possible to get so focused on the job that you're doing out there in the world. It is so possible to get so focused on, you know, we're raising our kids, we're running here, we're running there, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're cleaning the house, we're doing all these daily activities, and we're dealing with frustrations. Oh, we got some disappointments. And we go through all this life stuff, and we forget that the main goal is to live for Jesus. And we forget that the main goal is to get prepared for eternity. And in the midst of difficult times, listen to what the Apostle Paul said in 2 Corinthians 4. I'm going to read verses 16 to 18. Listen to what he says here. Therefore, he says, we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. I guess that's where the grace of God was really kicking in there. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, that's the world, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. I think about the Apostle Paul's life. I think that all of the hardship that he had to endure just from being a Christian and follower of Christ, I mean, he had every reason to give up on life. He had every reason to give up on following Jesus Christ. But he didn't, because he lived with an eternal perspective. And we got to catch something here in the text that we need to be living by as well. And that is, hey, guess what? The troubles of this life are temporary. Temporary. But the unseen spiritual dimension is eternal. And we've got to live with this perspective that, you know what? This clay pot, okay, this body, this physical clock is winding down. But spiritually, this clock is winding up to eternity. And when you and I live by that viewpoint, it's going to help us to maintain a lifestyle of living for Jesus, and we will not lose heart. Why? Because the problems of this life are only going to give way to a greater eternal glory that far outweighs anything that we ever experienced on this earth for the temporary time, right? Because you're going to live a lot longer on the other side than you'll ever live on this side. Maybe you have found yourself with a faulty perspective, and you're only focused on the here and now. You're only focused on your problems. You're ready to give up. I'm challenging you to get a new perspective on living with eternity in mind. That there is something beyond this world. This is the testing ground. And then we get to experience eternity. I'm running out of time, so I better head on out of this message. It's told that many years ago, there was a retiring elderly couple that was coming home from serving as missionaries in another country. And they're on the ship, and they're headed for, the harbor. And as they get closer, they begin to hear all these different cheers, and it seems like there's a crowd gathering. And the retiring missionary thinks, man, could it be that people are coming home to celebrate, our return? But they soon learned that there was a government official on board, and all of those people were there for this diplomat and not for this missionary couple who were retiring. As they left the ship, the husband said to his wife, he said, I can't believe that no one is here to greet us. He said, I've given my best years of my life. I've given up all kinds of comforts in order to tell others about Jesus in another country. And he said, here's this diplomat receiving all of this celebration and welcome home. And I don't get anything. It's as though no one even cares. It's just not fair. And his wife said something to him, and she said it with a different perspective. And she said, but honey, you're not home yet. Huh. You see, when we live our life with an eternal perspective, we can endure through the darkest of times knowing that one day we are going to receive the greatest welcome, the greatest celebration home in heaven forever. As you live your life here on earth, I want you to know that you really can be a winner. You really can live an endured life, a life of determination. I think by realizing the things that we talked about. One of those is that, there are problems in an imperfect world. You can do that by realizing that you need to depend on God's power, His grace. You need to live to serve others. And you need to live with an eternal perspective. Let's bow our heads and let's pray as we get ready for our decision time today. Dear Heavenly Father, you know everybody here intimately. Father, you know everybody's story. You know everybody's ups and downs and things that have happened and things that may be even going on right now. God, I pray that as we live this life, Father, that you would instill within us determination and endurance. And God, that you would remind us of those things that will help us to live that way. God, I pray for anybody here today that's just going through a tough time in their life. I pray, God, that this message, that your word will have spoken into their hearts. And I pray, Father, that your word would be encouraging today. I pray, Father, that there's something there that they could grasp onto and that it would really change their life. God, I pray too for decisions to be made today. Lord, whatever that may be, it may be that someone needs to come back for prayer. It may be, God, that somebody needs to give their life to you for the very first time. Maybe they need to rededicate themselves to live for you, to place membership. God, I pray that you would give people the courage to do so. It's in Jesus' name we do pray. Amen. Thank you for listening very well. I probably went on about 4 or 5 more minutes than I should have. But I did. It's done. I can't change it. But I really do hope the message spoke to your hearts. And listen, if there is somebody that needs to make a decision today, you come to the back. There'll be some elders back there, some ladies, and I'll be back there myself. Let's stand and let's sing.